Good evening, everybody, and welcome to America Dancing. On behalf of the staff and the crew, we're so happy you're here tonight for this post-performance discussion with urban bushwomen. I really want to encourage some of you to come on down closer. It's such a nice, intimate space here, and we've got lots to talk about, I'm sure. This is an opportunity for you all to ask questions and learn more about the creative process of making dances. And it's a wonderful time to share some ideas and get to know a little bit more about the artists. We're going to do about 20 minutes. They're going to come out in a moment. I'm Andrea Snyder, Executive Director of Dance USA, which is the national service organization for professional dance here in Washington, D.C. And it's my honor to moderate the conversation. My job is simply to facilitate the questions. I will repeat questions so that those in the back can hear, and I'm going to leave it to the artists to answer any question that you have. I apologize if I point because I don't know your names. But I'll try to be as descriptive as I can in identifying you. So without further ado, I would like to introduce a dear friend and colleague and a wonderful artist and artistic director, Jawole Willa Jo Zollar, who is the artistic director of Urban Bushwomen. And okay, the lights are on us a little bit, so we'll try and focus really clearly on who we've got out there. So have we got a question for Jawole in particular before the rest of the dancers come out? Yes, I've got one right here on the corner here.
Is there any connection between your group and Pearl Primus other than the performance that you did tonight?
Okay, so the question is there any connection between Jawole and Urban Bushwomen and Pearl Primus longer than or more involved than creating the work around Pearl Primus's artistry?
I don't know that company members met Pearl Primus. Maybe some individually did, but we did not meet her as a company. She passed away in 1994, and it was her legacy that really drew me and then the company to her work. I felt a lot of connections between her work and the work of Urban Bushwomen, and that was the connection. I want to introduce two artists who have just come out. I don't know if there's a microphone down there.
Hello, my name is Nora Chipaumire.
And you're from where?
I'm from Harare, Zimbabwe, and I live in Brooklyn, New York.
Peace, my name is Crystal Brown. I'm from Kinston, North Carolina, and I live in the Bronx, New York.
Good, thank you. They'll be coming out and we'll have them join us. Another question about the work. Yes, there's a woman. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, can you come to my high school? Do you have any film recordings that I can show my students?
What high school are you at?
Milfordville Academy in Baltimore.
Well, you never know.
Sitting in the row in front of her.
Is Amy right there? She'll discuss it with you. But the question is, do you have any film or video that's available for students to study?
A lot of universities have requested different pieces of the work that's on video or DVD, so that's something to call the office about. They're usually back of the house recordings. We have very few professional, when I say professional, like things that have been done for television. There are many of the CDs and the DVDs that we have are broadcast quality, but they haven't been done specifically for camera. They've been documentation that's from the back of the house for performance. You want to introduce yourselves as you come in and tell where you're from?
Good evening. My name is Reverend Nia Sally Cole Eubanks, and I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana.
Good evening. I'm Rhea Patterson. Hi, Mom. From Richmond, Virginia.
Hi, I'm Paloma McGregor. I'm from St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
And we have two.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Maria Bauman, and I'm from Jacksonville, Florida.
Jambo, my name is Wanjiro Kamuyu, and I'm from Nairobi, Kenya.
Good evening. My name's Christine, originally from Michigan.
Great. I have a question, actually. When you first conceived Walking with Pearl, what did you imagine it was going to be, and how did it change over time?
I really wasn't sure what it was going to be. I started just researching her life and trying to pull together whatever research I could in the elements of her life and trying to understand the journey that she had been on and the influences and the things that made her such a powerful woman. And when I was contacted or found out about the archives at ADF that had her journals, her unpublished journals, when I started reading her writing, that's when I really started to key into her heart. So then it became that I wanted to connect my heart to her heart artistically. And that started making the shape of the piece. And then I realized that, you know, her life, there were actually three big areas of her life that really spoke to me. One was her time that she spent in Africa, the other was her time in the South, and the third is her time that she spent in the Caribbean. Haven't got to that one yet. And those, the Southern Diaries and the Africa Diaries just spoke to me. So when I read her words, that's when I started keying into what the piece would be about, was something about the journey that those words evoked.
Does somebody have a question for the dancers? Because they're right here. Yes, Suzanne, right in the middle.
Hi, what a piece. Wow. It was really incredible. That's not a question, but I had to put it in. Could some of you talk about the creative process in the studio with Jawole and how that might be different than maybe some other choreographers you've worked with? There seems to be so much richness and emotion and feeling, and I felt like I really knew why you were up there. That came across so clearly, and I just would like to hear you talk about the process of creating it from the standpoint of a performer.
I can't repeat everything that you said. However, I think it's pretty self-evident if some of the dancers would discuss their creative process with Jawole and how they got to the point of really experiencing the work.
I think I'd like to talk about Africa Diaries, because that was my first time in the company, and I think that's when I noticed because I was coming from such a drastically different school of thought, it really impacted me when we started creating that work in January of 2004. And I remember her really giving us so much freedom that it was uncomfortable for me. We sat for a while reading her words, and then she sort of gave us a chunk that she felt was charged energetically and asked us to create something very sort of almost primitive, and to go as far as we really wanted to go with it. And then from there she sort of hone things down, develop, said, look at this piece and develop it more, let's take this back. So we really had a lot of it was our voice, which is why you see that we're so connected to it, because it really came from us, and we were given the freedom to really go within and pull something out without feeling judged or feeling like, no, that's not what I want, because we were all in the same place at that point, like really searching for what was the root and the seed choreographically of her words.
I'll just speak about Southern Diaries. Going through the process of Southern Diaries was, again, sort of parallel to Africa Diaries with the text, but I feel like a lot of us who are from Florida and North Carolina had a chance to bring in an even more intimate part of ourselves, a part of our heritage, so to speak. There is a section or an exercise that Jawole took us through, and she asked us to become these old women. And I became my grandmother for a good 3 days in the studio. And my grandmother has passed on for years now, but it made me remember who she was, the mannerisms, the attitude, what it must have felt like to be in her body. And then that transformed itself into the people or the characters or the spirits that you see in Strange Fruit.
Well, maybe I'll
add a word or two. With Africa Diaries, it was interesting because of everything that everyone has said. But on top of that, I personally kind of suggested that, Jawole, listening to this Zimbabwean music. And so right there, boom, I was like in Zimbabwe, of course. So for me, it was so easy to go anywhere with that because the mbira is the spirit music, and it was very easy. With the Southern Diaries, of course, I felt like I was Pearl Primus going to the South. She was also an outsider to that culture. And so a part of me is investigating and looking outside and empathizing. And that too, I think, is an important part. Not everybody, it comes from within the culture, but we're all able to empathize.
And one of the things that I do to kind of help that is I brought pictures together. I brought pictures of old women in the South. I like to use a lot of visual stimulation as a director, so rather than me having to pull things out, the more information that I give them, then the more that they can open out and access things. So we had a lot of picture research actually for both pieces.
Great. A couple more questions? Yes, there's a hand right in the middle there, next to Suzanne.
What about the ones who came into the process later, the more recent?
The question is, it's an interesting question. What happens for a newer dancer who joins the company in this process? And I think Paloma probably could speak to that, who hadn't gone through the initiation of the creation of the work.
I felt lucky with Southern Diaries because I was an apprentice with the program at the time and happened to go with the company to the initial creative process, go through the initial creative process. But I've been with the company for 3 months, so. What I wanted to say earlier, so I'm glad you brought this up, is that one thing I would say about Jawole's process is that the work is alive. So the work is constantly living and changing and growing depending on what she sees the work, the newness that she sees the work with each time she witnesses it and is involved in the studio with the work. And so for a new person coming in, there's still a chance to, because I'm bringing myself to the work, I'm not necessarily replacing the person who was in the work before. And so it's refreshing to know that I'm not just learning movements in space, but then I'm adding my creative voice to the process because the nature of the company's work is that the work is living.
Good. Thank you for that. Another question right down here in the front, sir.
Tell us about the sequences of laughter. Where did it come from? How did it develop? What did it feel like doing that?
Aha, great. The question, or the request, is to speak a little bit about the section in the second piece that included all the laughter and where it came from and what it meant and why, and see where she goes, and then we'll add some voices here.
Well, there's a tradition in the South that's called telling lies, where people sit on the front porch and they tell stories. It's like how big the fish is, and they tell stories. And so when we were first making the piece, we had I like to work with index cards, and that was one of the ideas as we were throwing out ideas about the South, telling lies. And initially we were doing it by telling stories. And it felt like it was placing the piece maybe in the wrong genre. So we then just kind of honed it down to the laughter of the stories, and that when your soul sometimes is really heavy and you're bearing a lot of things, then laughter becomes one of the ways that people get through hard times.
Anyone want to add anything to that? Yes.
Excuse me. That section, I actually had a breakthrough tonight. It was the best that I think I've done it tonight because I allowed myself to really let the laughter lead the movement for the first time because there was choreography laid on it and I got really stuck in the choreography. And so I had a little private one-on-one, and tonight I was like, yeah, you scored.
All right, we have time for about one or two more questions. I know there's a hand right down here.
Yes, I'd like to know if the intense emotion came separate from the movement, learning the movement, or if they were together.
The question is whether the emotion and the intense emotion that's born from this piece came connected to the movement or after the creation of the piece, or where did the emotion sort of sink in here for all of you?
Okay, you want to go first? Okay. You go first.
I'll keep it brief. I was just going to say that I think what is unique about Jawole's work is that she recognizes that what is most beautiful in all of us is the most authentic self, and therefore we work from that innermost kernel. So nothing feels, at least in the ideal, nothing feels pasted on, and rather we work from the feeling and the theme and the subject matter first, and use the movement vocabulary as a vehicle rather than as the end. And so for me, the emotion always comes first, and I think that's Jawole's intention, is that the emotion always comes first, and then the movement is just the way that we translate that to you.
I was just going to add to what Maria was saying, is that for me it comes from a real place. So if your arm is out, it's purpose. So why is your arm out? What motivates it? And Jawole's always talking about lengthening, finding that outer, that sphere around your whole being. So it's never, for me, it's never just dance for dance sake. My mother's a storyteller, and that's what I loved about coming into the companies, because each step, each plie, each tendu is my personal life story. So for me, it's like, it comes together in a perfect marriage, because it's not just the emotion and it's not just the step, but you find a world where both can kind of walk hand in hand and say, you need me and I need you in order for this to become all that it needs to become.
And there's techniques that I've developed over time to help the artists find that. That it does start from an emotional ideal often for me, and the movement amplifies that. And then the ways to get that so that it is enlivened, that's the way I call it. Sometimes we'll talk through, like we did that tonight, the opening is just talking through what the connection of the movement so that it gets into a real place. And my background was very much in theater, so I use a lot of theater games and theater processes to help people find those emotional beats, the dramatic beats, in the way that if there was a script.
These lovely ladies have 2 performances tomorrow. These wonderful artists need some rest and need to go get some food, I'm sure. So we're going to call it a night. I want to thank you all so much for gracing the stage here at the Kennedy Center. And I want to encourage you to come back next Friday night for Merce Cunningham and another post-performance discussion with a fabulous company. So safe travels, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Close to me in the